Today, let's talk about an essay and the title Tesol and the Discipline. This essay has been written by John Gray. John Gray teaches at University College London. His background is English language teaching. This essay talks about Tesol. It's about teaching English to speakers of other languages. TESOL. Teaching English to speakers of other languages. It explores how Tesol relates to English studies. As we know, English studies emerged in the 19th century. The focus of English studies has been literary studies, mostly. We already know that English studies had a colonial intention in the early days. Charles Kingsley, in 1890, he writes, or he believes, he says, so. He says that English studies had a colonial intention. There are many other thinkers also who say so. But there are some thinkers who take English studies as a progressive subject as well. It is not that all of the thinkers take English studies as a colonial tool to exploit the natives. Some still regard English studies as an area of study that gives priority to subjective aesthetic judgment than the objective knowledge. So these people think English studies does not give us objective knowledge. It prioritizes subjectivity. It's all about search for beauty. It's all about aesthetics and aesthetic judgment, subjective aesthetic judgment. So different scholars have taken English language studies differently. That is true to some extent because knowledge is not apolitical. There is ideology always at work. But Tesol is something different. It has different purposes. You may look at its development in mid 20th century. Mid 20th century. Britain's fall and the rise of USA as a superpower. Though this is not directly related to that, but this particular fact has some bearing with the rise of Tesol. It was before the mid 20th century in some other forms. Tesol was there. It's not that Tesol was not there. Teaching English as a second language, it was not there at all before 20th century. It is not so. It was there in some subtle forms in other firms. It was there in certain form within the Department of English. But Robert Phillipson, claims that the rise of Tesol, is after Second World War. It was formally established as an academic subject in the UK after the Second World War. When Second World War ended, right? 1945. We have a thinker, Pennycook. Pennycook, writes that English language was a part of colonial mission, but it's not so simple story. It was not just a part of colonial mission. It's not so simple. This is why it's not so simple a story. Colonialism created a ground for the study of English language as well, right? Colonialism forced people to study English language. That's one story. But colonialism created a ground for the study of English language. That is another reality. That's a different way of saying the same thing. So British Tesol once wrote, look, British Tesol itself once wrote, I quote, "Our language is our asset greater than oil." And this is endless resource. Our supplies are endless. So though we do not have monopoly, our brand remains highly sought after. This is what British Tesol wrote once. It shows you know they were thinking of using English language as a tool to somehow subjugate people, or the people, to prove their supremacy, to prove their superiority. So English became a very powerful tool for the colonizers, for the educators, for the West, right? So by late 20th century, it had already become a de facto language. It had already become a de facto language, and it was almost used in all disciplines, and it was used almost globally, right? So what is TESOL? Let's answer the question first. What is TESOL? Initially, the term ELT, English language teaching, was popular in UK. But North Americans started using another term for the similar kind of thing, and they used this term TESOL, 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 instead of ELT. And both of these terms are synonymous now. But TESOL has become much more popular these days, this term. In 1957, University of Edinburgh created an academic base for TESOL. We should never forget the contribution that University of Edinburgh made in 1957. It was under the backings of British Council itself. They were under the sponsorship of British Council. So in the rise of TESOL, the contribution of British Council is also immense. And they treated it as a subject under applied linguistics. TESOL generally comes under applied linguistics. And they had an aim of establishing TESOL as a discipline. They believed that TESOL would provide a wider framework for language teaching. So they were very much optimistic about this new academic discipline, TESOL, because they thought TESOL would provide the wider framework for language teaching. Everything about language teaching may come under TESOL. This is what they intended it to be. Similarly, in 1941, at the University of Michigan, English Language Institute was established. Remember, English Language Institute. Okay, it was established. And it was intended for non-native speakers of English. And it also provided a basis for the rise of TESOL, right? So the English Language Institute, established at University of Michigan, it has also played a very crucial role in the rise of TESOL as a separate discipline. And its first journal, TESOL's first journal, is Language Learning, a journal of applied linguistics. And it was published in 1948. So this journal also has a very much significant role in the rise of TESOL as an academic subject. Don't forget this name. As per Guy Cook wrote it in 2005. As per Guy Cook, there are three stages. There are three stages, or three phases, okay, in the evolution of any applied linguistics, be it TESOL, English language, or any other language. Sorry, no, not in any language. So Gay Cook is talking about TESOL in English language, and he says there are three stages. In the first stage, first phase, he calls it the period from 1950 to 1980. This is the first stage. And 1980 to 1990 is the second stage of TESOL. 1992 till present, this is the third stage of TESOL, he says. Okay. Now, let me discuss what happened in first stage, in second stage, and in third stage. It's as per Guy Cook. The first phase was, as Henry Widdowson wrote, the first phase was linguistics applied. It was a part of applied linguistics, right? Second phase had more autonomy. Its practitioners adopted more autonomous or independent perspective. They were moving away from applied linguistics. It has all is not just an applied linguistics, right? Though it is a part of applied linguistics. And the third phase, consolidates its own field, Tesol's field. It was a radical departure from existing orthodoxies. This is what Cook writes. Okay, so how was it a radical departure then? For example, applied linguistics questioned the validity of the concept of the native speaker, and that is standard, one standard for all, one size fits for all kind of model. Applied linguistics does not accept. But Tesol somehow tries to impose a British way of speaking English or American ways of speaking English. We know that. So Tesol and applied linguistics, they have some fundamental differences as well. Okay. So, but in 1990, but in 1990, the Tesol tended to become much more interdisciplinary. Ben Rampton, made Ben Rampton, R-A-M-P-T-O-N. Ben Rampton made this case actually. He wrote that English Tesol became very interdisciplinary in 1990s. Tesol incorporated descriptive linguistics, applied linguistics, sociolinguistics, and many more. We can see the same trend with English studies as well, right? Because in 90s, English studies became much more interdisciplinary. We brought ideas from many other disciplines. Tesol also did the same. English language tests were being popular in 1980s. British examination boards introduced different language-focused tests worldwide. For example, A-level is also something that gives more priority, more focus on English language proficiency. So more and more courses focused on language such as social linguistics, descriptive linguistics, discourse and society, varieties of English. There are so many subjects. Look at these subjects. So language, gender and identity, language, culture and power. Directly, indirectly, these all subjects are related to language studies. So these courses on language study were being more and more popular after 1980s, 90s. In UK, commercial sectors started asking for Tesol certification. Such tests were validated by Cambridge, Trinity College, such reputed, examination boards. But at master's level, Tesol was spread across linguistics and humanities. Tesol was a little bit under trouble, right? So kind of this is a part of the larger system. So it was a component only there, right? So master's program, they were offering different subjects, and those subjects were relatable to Tesol. The subjects such as English and foreign language teaching, social linguistics, and sociocultural theory. These were the courses being taught under English departments or humanities department. So discuss society and culture. Course such as social and psychological aspect of second language learning, social linguistics, language in its social context, language and identity, English in diverse world context, introduction to corpus linguistics, using corpora in language teaching, and multilingualism. These were the courses under humanities, social sciences in master's level, right? So they saw that Tesol was being used in different academic disciplines. It was being more and more interdisciplinary, and it was collaborating with English studies as well, and all the subjects of humanities as well. Now let's talk about commercial content of the Tesol. Throughout Tesol, English is being delivered in the market. Sorry, through Tesol, English is being delivered, sold in the market. So in 21st century, Tesol had already become $3-4 billion industry for Britain. So it was so lucrative, money-making business. So the rise in the number of international students in the West further expanded the scope of Tesol. Obviously, British Council's role is also very crucial here. And another thing that we need to take into consideration is EMI, English as a medium of instruction. Even in Nepal, we often use English as a medium of instruction. It expands the role of Tesol, importance, scope of Tesol. It further strengthens Tesol. And this is what happened in the rest of the part of the world, right? Some British private schools such as Dalwick College, Marlborough College, they have opened their branches in Asia, and English as a medium of instruction became more important with such international, chains. It increased the scope of Tesol. So English has become a commodity, you know, that is bought and sold in the market these days. In this capitalist era, English language skill, books or audio, video, okay, they are sold in the market like hot cake. So Karl Marx defines, so English is a commodity. That may surprise you. Karl Marx has defined commodity as something that has a price attached to it. Commodity is something that has a price attached to it, right? So it may be a physical or mental capability. Commodity may be anything. So it may be a physical form or other form. Commodity, maybe in physical form, in other form. So in this sense, English language has become a commodity. It has textbook, for example, audio, video cassette. You know, they may be physical. As a teacher is teaching English language, giving the English language course, that may be somehow, intellectual, but it's a kind of commodity that is sold and bought in the market. This is the fact, and Tesol has made it possible, right? So, you know, Tesol sells English language tests and textbooks, classes, and institutions. They are there at the marketplace. There are English textbooks, there are classes, there are institutions that teach English language. There are tests, right? There are different kinds of tests, which try to test students' English language capability. So English has become a sellable skill. Okay, English has become a sellable skill, and Tesol is contributing a lot. Now let's think about what's the E in Tesol. This is the most problematic area now. What's E in Tesol? Of course, it's an academic field. Tesol is an academic field. It's a part of the applied linguistics. That's obvious. It has made English studies richer because Tesol has contributed a lot in humanities as well. And Tesol caters the need of those who want to work in other countries. It does not emphasize on a variety of English. It follows Western yardstick, right? So why literary studies may not be sufficient for those who want to learn English? So why Tesol is needed? What's the scope of Tesol here? And it says there are two things that we need to understand first. There are two problems with learning English through written textbooks only and through English literary textbooks only, like that. First issue is how do we represent spoken English, or how do texts represent spoken English? That's problem number one. And problem number two is how English is represented at a phonological level. Okay, phonological level. Corpus linguistic has made it very clear to us now. Spoken and written English, they're different. The grammar of spoken English and the grammar of written English is also different. But because we often don't speak the way we write, right? This is clear now. So written English is often tidy. Spoken English is often a bit rough. And it's with ruptures, it's with hesitations. And there is a gap between textbook representation of a language and ethnographic data. When you read English textbook, the way they represent English, if you go to the real society and listen to the people speaking, that is what ethnographic data collection. There will be some differences. Okay. For example, look at this example. This is the written script, and students are being taught this. And this is not the way we speak when we speak. We don't speak so in such a coherent, such a smooth, such a flawless, such a tidy manner. We don't speak. Okay, when we speak, there will be lots of hesitations. So this kind of text that English textbooks prescribe in order to teach the students English language, they are not sufficient because they somehow misrepresent. They teach us unnatural English. That's the problem with English language learning. So in written script, less agitation, tidier, coherent. So it seems unnatural. For example, interviews in textbook are gross misrepresentation of real interviews. There is a huge gap. Interviews that you read in a textbook and the real interview that you face. You know, there will be a lot of quite difference, because the interview that you read in the text, they're somehow misrepresented. That's not how people talk. Okay, that's the problem with teaching English language. Now so let's talk about second issue: phonological representation of English. What is this? The essayist accepts that his own material uses mostly British accent. He has written many texts. You know, they teach us how to learn English, but the author accepts his books follow British accent. British linguistic features are highlighted there. So British accent, phonology. That's problematic. Indians don't speak English the way Britishers speak. Americans don't speak English the way Britishers speak. So that's the problem. So look at the example look at this example. A teacher of business English writes, I think it's a mistake. I don't really know why. Maybe, it's the accent that has got the prestige attached to it. So this English teacher said, why people give so much, importance to accent? Because accent is something that you cannot avoid. Indians speak in their own accent, Africans speak in their own accent, but society, Tesol people, IELTS TOEFL people, they give more accent on the accent, right? And that's something wrong, he says. Because he says, why should I speak like Britishers? When I like, for example, American English or Indian English, aren't they all equally valid? He says. So the question is very valid. And Tesol has not been able to answer that question, right? So we need to listen to other variants as well. We should be able to understand all the variants of English as well. But Tesol has not been able to incorporate that issue. If you don't understand others, if you don't listen to other variants, you will not be able to communicate to these people. You may not understand the way they speak. For example, you encounter the Chinese English speakers. You may not be able to understand that Chinese guy speaking English. So if you go through Tesol line, that's the problem. So Tesol has trouble in addressing these issues, and the author accepts that. To conclude, Tesol is also a Janus facet. Okay, facet. Janus facet. Just like English studies, it looks both ways. There are two directions that it's taking. It's cut in a kind of conflict, On the one hand, Tesol is interdisciplinary. It accepts language is dynamic, it's political, it's cultural, and it's the result of negotiation. It keeps on changing, it's growing. That's the way English studies have been defining English. On the one hand, Tesol accepts that. On the other hand, Tesol is a business. It markets a model of English, a particular model of English, speak English like the Britishers or Americans, like that. This is the standard. So it may mislead many students, right? So they may form a wrong idea about language. They may form wrong notion about the nature of English. So as a student of English language, if somebody tells you or teaches you that there's only one correct way to speak English, that's an utter nonsense. You're being given wrong information. And Tesol is more or less doing that. On the one hand, it accepts that English language is cultural, it's not apolitical. So there are geographical indications as well. geographical variations as well. All of the people all around the world do not speak English in a similar fashion, in a similar manner. On the one hand, it accepts that. On the other hand, it follows another guideline. It wants to dictate. Tesla wants to dictate. That's the problem. For example, look here. I don't know how you can afford to buy all those fabulous clothes. Now, look at this dialogue. So unnatural. Do you speak like this when you speak? Still or hopefully? Still, I'm going to get a bonus. Hopefully, I'm going to get a bonus. We don't speak this way, you know. After all, or presumably, we don't speak this way. Do you speak that way? So unnatural dialogues are being taught in textbook. So, Edward Said says if we teach this kind of language, if we give this kind of language in English language textbooks, probably they will not do, they will not they will not do justice. So this sort of language is stripped of life. It's dull. It's too technical. Too clean. This is not how people speak. So unnatural. So Side says we need to rethink E in Tesol. 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 There is E. So when Tesol says English, what is that English? Is it a monolithic one model, or Tesol has the courage to accept other variations as well, variants as well? So this is the question. This is the question that's haunting Tesol right now. The author accepts, but the essayist accepts. Tesol still has not been able to do that. Tesol still has not been able to find out the reconciliation. Such aspects of languages are still ignored in Tesol largely. They're still prescribing British model or American model of speaking English. So these are the problems that Tesol is surrounded with. But also is very confident that Tesol is a vibrant field, and what English study cannot do, it can do, especially in relation to teaching people how to speak English language. So it is much more focused on teaching students how to speak English language, how to write in English language. So Tesol is a more language focused course, and it teaches us some skill that we can sell in the market. We can be prosperous, we can earn money, we can earn respect. And this is what the author is trying to talk about. So author is very much confident that Tesol will keep on progressing,